What a beautiful day, campers! Just a few quick announcements. First, we have some special guests visiting us today. Please make your way over to the gazebo and say hello to the Children of the New Dawn. And make sure you pick up a pamphlet while you're there. They're into some really interesting stuff. Next, all art classes are postponed because, well, we can't find the teacher anywhere. It's weird how people keep going missing. Anywho, tonight's mess hall dinner is mac and cheese. I know it's a favorite, so I'll see you cheddar goblins there a little later on. Except for maybe Mandy. Seriously, she just went out for colored pencils 2 days ago and nobody's seen her since.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Bunk 237. I am very excited for this episode, and I am one of your hosts, Robin.
And I'm Tuyet, the other host.
Nailed it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And today's guest is Justin Lascelle, the world's foremost researcher on the paranormal entity known as Axe Slasher. Hey, Justin.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting for me. I can't believe that anyone wants to hear about our research. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. It's a whole episode of that, but first...
That's right.
We'll spend a little time talking about Mandy, 2018 movie starring Nic Cage in all his glory. It is directed by Panos Cosmatos. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Andrea Riseborough co-stars. Jeremiah, the cult leader, played wonderfully by Linus Roche. I don't know how you say it.
A lot of names.
A lot of names. And I have to say, I did not know too much about Mandy going in, except for that it was supposed to be crazy. And I was a little concerned when we chose it for the podcast because I thought that perhaps it would be like way too out there and way too crazy for me to even get, you know? But it really is sort of a simple classic tale of boy meets girl, boy and girl live happily in the woods for some time. Girl accidentally catches the attention of deranged cult leader. Cult kidnaps boy and girl with the help of a LSD-ridden demonic biker gang. Cult murders girl and boy goes on a wild revenge spree. And that's
Classic
pretty
tale.
much. Classic tale.
I think that was actually what was written in the script is just that exact
that
layout that you just did, and then they just shot around that.
Everything was ad-libbed.
Even though it's like a fairly simple story, there is a lot going on that we have to discuss. Tonally, visually, everything. So my first question for you guys is, if you had to describe this movie to someone, what would you say? How would you characterize it?
I would say 100% my shit.
Yes, love it.
It's like metal, fantasy, drugs, specifically LSD, Nicolas Cage, like incredible, like super saturated colors, cults, like
love a cult.
Love cults.
Love a
Hope
cult.
to be in one or lead one at some point, to be honest with you.
I always wondered, it's like, that seems hard, but real cool. I think I'd be a great follower.
It seems hard to lead a cult.
Yeah, right? I mean, I don't know. Seems
It
like
is
to
a
get
great time to lead a
people
cult.
onto your side, right?
I think that part of that is figuring out who the right person is, right? Like if you can find the right person that buys your specific line of bullshit, you are in. Like
Right.
you don't have to work further than that. I think it's more about selection than it is about convincing a ton of people. I don't know. That's just my take
That's very
on
true. I mean, the cult in this movie had 6 members?
it. Yeah.
That's all you need, yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Was Jeremiah, would you guys have followed Jeremiah Sand?
God, no.
Hell no.
Absolutely not. No way.
He was fucking crazy.
Yeah, no. I've thought about what kind of cult I would join, and I think that... So, are you guys familiar with Om Shinrikyo, which is a Japanese cult that you may be familiar with their sarin attacks that they pulled off on the Japanese subway in the 90s?
No.
Vaguely.
Tell us more.
Yeah, so Om Shinrikyo was led by this very charismatic blind leader I'm spacing his name right now, so that's awful. But anyway, their whole thing is that they actually went after computer scientists, biologists, and like people that thought that they were smarter than the rest of the world, and basically hit everyone in Japan at this time when like there was a religious void. So like Shinto was falling to the wayside, and like there was this period of experimentation of like, well, what if Christianity? What if these other things? What if Buddhism? What if Shinto? And because of that, like kind of lack of a national religion or a lack of an agreement on one, he kind of came in and painted himself as this otherworldly leader. And he actually used things like manga and like movies and all these different kind of like every type of advertising or film making you could think of, or like artistic pursuit. He put out this idea that he was some sort of otherworldly savior for people, which ended up getting these very smart people. I don't know how, like maybe they read a cool manga and were like, that's it. That's what I want to be, the dude who's, I want to follow the dude who's flying through space with all the cool lines behind him. But eventually they grew to the point where they were making deals with Russia to buy attack helicopters and buying off politicians and almost, running shit for a very long time until they pulled off these sarin attacks. And finally it was like, we got to break this up. We have to stop Om Shinrikyo.
Wow, that's crazy.
See, I think that's what I'd go for, is something where I'd sitting around with a bunch of computer scientists being like, yeah, we are smarter than everyone. Huh? Yeah, that's totally. Anyway, our God over here, the blind man who makes us drink his bathwater.
Robin, what kind of cult would you be in?
Probably worship like a dog or an animal before any type of person,
That would be
like
really cool.
it just has to be like a really cute dog, and I'd be like, yeah, they're right. They
There's a
wouldn't
lot
have
of
to
Instagram
say
accounts
anything.
like that.
Yeah, right.
Like, next thing you know, Doug the Pug's ordering followers to carry out attacks, and we're like, okay, I guess this is the world we live
I
in
mean,
now.
look at his eyes. How could you say no?
As a cult leader, that's a good hook too, because like you could say literally whatever you want and go, hey, it's not me, it's Doug the Pug. He's the one who's ordering this, and I'm just, the bearer of his
Right.
message.
Right.
And look at his face.
We should talk about Jeremiah though, because as far as cult leaders go, I would say he was like not the most effective. Not the best at being the
say
head of
that?
a cult.
Yeah, because everyone died, or because like
He had a real like Charles Manson failed musician
totally
vague Christianity thing going on, but like
Yeah.
without, he got blinded by his own ego, at many points, believed he was the chosen one for like no discernible reason.
Yeah.
and the fact that he had this like terrible hippie record and plays it after he kidnaps her and like talks himself up in this grandiose way, and he's naked, and just like the big motions that he's making in his life and in this woman's life, and this woman who's about to die probably at that point, she doesn't know yet, but the fact that like he would make this big grandiose musical debut to her and that she would just laugh. She'd be like, this is your song? This is so embarrassing. God, when she laughed, I just like, it was so mean, but it was so good because it was a bad song.
Yes. Well, I mean, you could also, there's so many layers to that, at least kind of like visually from what I picked up, whereas Jeremiah himself to me feels like the utmost worst representation of a male ego that you could like just cranked up to 11, where
Yeah.
every awful impulse of like inherent to a male ego of like every, dominion is mine, everything is mine, it's all here for me, listen to my music, look at my dick, like all those horrible things. And the way that can be shattered and broken by the laugh of a strong woman is like, that is such a powerful metaphor. And I love that she's like laughing at his dick, laughing at his music, laughing at the whole idea that he's leading these sleepy people that are all just kind of like along for the ride, and just shatters it to the core and by laughing at him. Like I still feel like that's such a powerful scene.
Yeah, it's true. And especially because he went into it saying, have you ever heard of the Carpenters? This is much better.
While she's wearing a Black Sabbath shirt. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
skip right over that, going to the B section.
She was such an interesting character, and her and Nic Cage's relationship, I guess his character is Red, she's Mandy, so Red and Mandy's relationship. It was very quietly developed in like the
Yeah.
first hour of the movie. You
Yeah.
know, we didn't get a lot of their background except for like that weird story she told about her dad beating all the starling birds or whatever.
Yeah.
God, yeah.
But it felt to me, once we got to the action and he was broken by her death and decided to go on a revenge mission, it seemed really earned and like we were like raring to go, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that although they didn't get too much into the backstory of the two of them, I mean, you could see that there was you knew that there was a particularly strong bond with this couple, like living in the woods, and the way that like he reacts to like her artwork in the beginning and how like great you
Yeah.
can see it like in his eyes how much he loves her, and how they're both a little broken as people, and this sort of and how they've kind of like come together and found this place where they both fit together and they both belong. And so like when she died, and especially I think it's so evident after she dies and after I can't not call him Nicolas Cage.
I know.
after he like gets free and then it like he's in the bathroom and like all the colors change in the movie and he's like slamming the vodka and pouring it over himself and he's just yelling at a grief. You didn't have to know anything else about that couple except for like his reaction to her death.
Yeah. I think that the relationship between the two of them is played out really masterfully in the beginning because we don't have a lot of like exposition about how they met, how long they've been together, all those different things. But one thing that's super clear is the crazy bond that exists between the two. Like you can tell, Andrea Riseborough did such an amazing job with that character where we literally only have 2 scenes that give us any inkling into her background, which is the scene where she's walking through the woods and she finds that weird animatronic dead deer. And then the other scene is where she's talking about the starlings, but through kind of like the scars on her face, the subtlety of the looks that she gives, we get this idea that as much as she is a savior to Red, we can feel that he is some sort of savior or completion to her too. Like the character of Red has a lot of interesting foreshadowing where in the beginning when he's doing the logging, as they're riding away on the helicopter, the buddy hands him a beer. He turns it away, which, to me signals some sort of sobriety.
Yeah.
Oftentimes with like addiction and things like that, there's that whole idea that if you're trying to become sober, you shouldn't start a new relationship because you end up replacing that addiction with that person. And I don't know if that's like a healthy way, but it's certainly something romantic to put on a screen, right? And as soon as, he experiences her loss, like all of that is out the window. He's doing coke off a piece of broken glass. He's pouring vodka down his underwear. He's trying the weird gray LSD goo and everything in between. And we can really feel that like that linchpin of his life is not missing.
Yeah. And I thought that the bathroom scene is incredible for so many reasons. But the choice of Nicolas Cage for this role is amazing, first of all, and also sort of subverted expectations because in a lot of ways he is the sanest character in the movie. He's the one with the most justified reaction to things. And when he goes crazy, it's for a good reason, like everyone else is just starting way up here. He doesn't get there until his fucking girlfriend is murdered.
Yeah, he certainly operates with the most logic out of anyone else in the film.
Right.
I loved him in this. I thought he was so great. I mean, and I like him in general, but in this one I felt like such a perfect fit because the idea that he was the most normal one, and even like as a day job, he was like a lumberjack, which is a very normal job. Is that a normal job? It's like it just feels it's not an outrageous job. He's not a cult leader.
Yeah.
But it's even he plays that really well as this sort of like woodsy lumberjack with like a sort of a checkered past, possible recovering alcoholic and, trying to really live this quiet life. And then, but when he turns, he really turns. And I think that Nicolas Cage does such a great job of showing that descent And I think a lot of this movie is really just like the physical manifestation of like a man falling into descent.
Yeah, I think that there's several layers of like relapse to his character. There's obviously like the substance relapse, but in that scene where he's getting his crossbow back from Carruthers, and Carruthers is like, "What are you hunting?" He's like, "Jesus freaks!"
Yeah.
That whole scene implies that like
Right?
before
Yeah.
he was a lumberjack, he may have been hunting people in a big capacity. Like so, even just this idea of killing people.
Yeah, he gave Carruthers that weapon, and Carruthers already knew, it was like, it's safe just how you left it, like.
Right.
And then the next few lines, I was like, oh, he just explained the whole movie when he goes, they were weirdo hippie types, a whole bunch of them. Then there was some muscle. It didn't make any sense. There were bikers, gnarly psychos, and crazy evil.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciated that.
That may be the only exposition in the whole movie is just like, here, I'm going to lay it out to you in one scene.
Yeah.
Here
Doesn't
it
make
is.
any sense.
It doesn't make any sense that there is a gang of man-eating bikers, right? That live in the woods. They went crazy because they had a bad batch of LSD.
But also sadomasochistic and started wearing like full-on leather bodysuits with spikes on it. That could happen, I guess, if you got some weird acid. I don't know.
But also, does that make this an anti-drug movie?
I thought about that. Anytime there's like a camera effect of when someone is like tripping, it's always either like pretty well done or pretty cheesy,
You can tell when someone's actually experienced psychedelics when they make a
Totally.
scene like that. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, you didn't try these.
Yeah, totally. This one I was like, this is pretty good. Yeah, when Mandy's like
Yeah.
tied to the chair and like tripping, and the way that like the trails are happening all around her. But I did think this would be a terrible movie to watch while you were high.
Ooh, yeah. Wouldn't recommend that. We had talked a little bit about how perfect Nicolas Cage is as Red, but one interesting thing I found out when I was researching this movie, because I knew I was going to be talking about it with you fine folks, is that he was originally cast to be Jeremiah Sand and not Red. And he chose to be Red and like lobbied for himself, and they actually kind of cut him from the project. And then I think Panos, Elijah Wood, and Elijah's partner at Spectre Vision got together and like, we are crazy to let Nicolas Cage go. Like, we should allow him to just do this part, and we should rework
I read
this.
an article about him where I think they quote Ethan Hawke talking about Nicolas Cage and how he has sort of like divorced the idea that acting has to be realistic. Like divorced from that idea completely in a way that's totally still authentic and wonderful and interesting to watch. And he just felt like such a perfect fit, not only for that movie but for the role, because he's funny to watch. He's over the top, and he's he's got these like giant eyes I'm seeing because Tuyet has him on the background, and this huge smile and this sort of like booming kind of voice. It's sort of inherently humorous even if he's not trying to be, but I feel like this movie allowed for that and had space for that in other areas as well, in addition to his performance. Like, for example, the Cheddar Goblin. Let's talk about that commercial.
I love the
fucking
Cheddar Goblin.
Love the Cheddar Goblin. The guy that directed the Cheddar Goblin also directed Too Many Cooks, if you guys remember
Yes.
that short.
Yeah.
And like,
Oh,
I love a good fictional commercial, but the Cheddar Goblin was like kind of like nod in the way the movie to be like, hey, we're a movie. Like this is like, we're having fun here. It's a lot of like death and blood and gore and like killer biker gangs, but let's sit back a second here and watch this Cheddar Goblin.
I love the placement of that whole thing too, because it literally hits right after like that whole heart-wrenching scene where Mandy is burned alive in front of
Yeah.
Red, and then Red spends the whole entire evening basically mourning with a dagger in his side, and as he writhes and escapes from these barbed wire what do you call them, barbed wire restraints, like he walks in and the first thing he sees is a strange commercial about macaroni and cheese, and the fact that that hits at that point makes me feel like it's some sort of statement about like how mundane life can be regardless of like how deep and personal a tragedy you're going through. Like,
Totally.
hey, stuff's going to be broadcast. It's going to broadcast. You're going to see Cheddar Goblin. You're going to see Kraft macaroni and cheese, no matter what's happening in your...
The rest of the world is like still moving.
Sort of easy to get sucked into like how remote and weird this reality is, but then you realize like, oh no, this is just like, you know, a mountain town in the US somewhere where there are commercials.
Still capitalism and commerce to go to
Right.
make world go round.
We're still pushing how ridiculous that consumerism is, because like that
Right.
commercial is insane.
Oh,
in its
that's what
own
I was gonna
little-
say.
Own little capsule.
The Cheddar Goblin just vomiting macaroni and cheese all over these children.
I love that idea that Jeremiah is in what's essentially like a 3 foot by 3 foot room, and he's screaming like, "Look at all that is mine! Look at what he provides!" Like you can't even see past his own face of like how wrong he is in almost every aspect of his life. Look at what he provides: a place to squat. Okay.
Again, a great like kind of parody of like male ego, though, right?
Absolutely. I think that is 100%. I mean, I hate to say with certainty what metaphors are, but I almost feel 100% certain that's what Jeremiah is supposed to be.
And then it's such a fantastic moment when Red grabs him by the head and he starts begging for his life. You know, like,
I'll suck your dick, man. I'll do it right now. And then immediately turns into like, no, you get down on your knees in front of me. Like that whole every stage of denial, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
bargaining,
yeah.
acceptance, anger.
2 seconds before his head gets comically just squeezed until it pops.
Almost grossly categorized or kind of punctuated with Red seemingly having an orgasm at that point,
Yeah,
but like
that
kind
was
of
a weird
representing
moment.
I think that represents our release for the like as the audience of like, oh, thank God he's finally like achieved what he needed to. But it got a little sexual, kind of like, well, hey man, whatever works for you works for you. I'm not here to yuck your yum, but it definitely read as like that dude just came.
It really did.
I think there was a lot of little layers of kind of psychosexual, right? Like across, which I think is also part of every cult story. I feel like I can't watch a cult documentary without them at some point getting to the weird sex stuff. Like it's every cult has weird sex stuff. The scene where Jeremiah has Mandy tied up and he's playing the song for her when she's laughing at him and he's getting really angry, but he's sort of, the camera pans up to him and it sort of looks like he's masturbating while he's yelling at her a little bit, which is, I think, interesting mirror image.
Yes, he was, for sure.
Okay, cool. I was just being like shy. I was like, excuse me. I didn't mean to walk in on you doing that.
I think that ties back into the male ego thing of like he just lost all the power he thought that he had, so he's like trying to feebly take it back by like owning his own orgasm or like still getting what he wanted from her, even though he's the one performing. It's so gross that is even the thought, but I think that's definitely what's behind it. Like that dude's jerking off in that scene, and it's upsetting.
Right, confirmed. Glad.
Glad we cleared that up.
That's my only question for this whole thing.
That's what you came in here with, circled in red, that you needed to find out.
Was it? Okay. How did the other people get into the cult? You know, like.
I have a fan theory.
Yeah.
Share,
I
please.
think so. There's 4 men who look distinctly related, in my opinion. Like all the blonde guys with the mullets and the big noses. They all seem to have like some sort of relation to each other. And I think that's more of like either Jeremiah is part of their family or he's convinced the entire family to follow him, where like maybe Jeremiah is the best looking one in that family and therefore clearly touched by God and spoken to by God. And then the rest of that is just like ancillary mountain people that they've convinced to pull in either through their use of the chemist, which, by the way, that character, the chemist, love that dude's performance. So good. But I love that is the crux of like Jeremiah's powers, that Jeremiah thinks his power is that he is Jesus or God himself, whereas most of those people are there because they're convinced, coerced, or attracted to the notion of this LSD that he's able to procure from the chemist, even all the way down to the Black Skull motorcycle gang. You know, they probably started doing business with him because of the acid. He saw that as a way to influence them in some way and kept convincing the chemist to make something more powerful, and then they end up with the gray goo, which I would like to try the gray goo sometime in my life, maybe not an entire bottle of it, but, you know, a little tongueful like Red does halfway through after killing Fuck Pig. I'd like to give that a shot.
Yeah, there was a lot that happened in that moment that stuff touched his tongue.
Anything that makes you see your own face melt is like, all right, I'll give that one shot for sure.
At least once. Why not? Why not?
There were so many good campy 80s style face melting, eyes popping out of people's heads. Like that stuff, it just made me so happy.
Yes, absolutely.
Just full of joy.
You never see that stuff with the combination of like really artful camera work, right?
Yes.
Like generally they're in a scene where someone's head pops off of their eye, or in a movie where someone's head pops off or their eyes pop out. You don't have a lot of stuff where like the DP decides to shoot through several layers of glass to get a certain type of like light bokeh.
Right.
Whereas that's all over this movie. And I think that's one of the things I love about this movie is that it is stuff that is generally considered pretty lowbrow, approached the same way that a very serious art project would be approached, where it's like, yeah, that's a decapitation and a very simple revenge drug fuel kind of like almost video game storyline, but that's not the point. The point is we're making a film, and film is a high art form. And even though we're representing like, you know, bikers in leather and heads getting chopped off and all this kind of weird stuff, doesn't mean that we have to shoot it like we don't have any money or support or artistic vision or time on it. Like that is 100% my jam. Like anyone that approaches stuff like lowbrow concepts with highbrow technique, that's where I'm fucking like at my happy place.
I agree so hard.
Same.
You could also see all of the visual inspirations from like, you know, sort of the Kubrickian type things, sort of, you know, 80s slasher movie vibes, but also like Jodorowsky kind of like weirdness, you know, and big epic like landscapes, like while also like staying within the woods and the confines of this. And truly the lighting really fucking won me over so much, and such thoughtful lighting.
I believe the cinematographer was Ben Loeb. That is his name. He nailed it, killed it.
Killed it.
We should go through and list the genres and homages that we noticed, because there were so many. There was the campy 80s horror stuff. There was the like sort of like Mad Max dystopian biker gang, you know, craziness. I thought that the first half of the movie was very David Lynchian. A lot of slow shots moving in on people while they tell stories in a detached style with music playing, like string music playing in the background.
Totally. Yeah.
It was like very reminiscent of Twin Peaks and stuff like that.
And effectively romantic too. Like that. Yeah. The whole reason the movie works is that we buy the initial like premise that this was a really deep love, and you can't get that without getting into romantic territory. Like so many relationships in horror movies, you just don't buy. You're just like, yeah, you're there for the day or however long the shoot is. But this almost felt like we dropped in on a very loving relationship, and we don't need any context other than kind of like the strength of that bond. That doesn't come with making a horror movie, right? Like Panos totally went into the like, hey, shoot it in a way that feels romantic and, you know, conveys that, even if I haven't expressly written any backstory.
Totally. And their backstory or their bond is very much explained by just the circumstances of their relationship, of them just living in the woods alone together, of her sort of being this like kind of off-kilter metal loving artist and him being this ex-addict logger. Like, you can just tell that maybe they don't fit in with the rest of society, and that it's just like a really lovely thing that they found each other,
Yeah.
even though it's not explained in dialogue.
Well, even like the long scene in the beginning where Mandy is telling the story, but she's just like laying, they're just like laying down with each other, and that's such a sweet, intimate moment. Even though that story is like bonkers, but that closeness is so evident, And I love those kinds of subtle scenes like that where you can show so much just by having like two people kind of like in a soft embrace, and you can see like how sensitive they are to each other, and sort of her willingness to sort of tell this like deep, scary story about her like childhood trauma. He did that in 5 minutes, showed an entire relationship.
It was like that, and then the scene where they talk about their favorite planets.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a good Marvel reference. There was the heavy metal animation, which was very cool, and I like that it dipped into that in a really, also what I felt was a pretty artful way without it being too much extrasensory, just because there's already so much going on and there's animation.
It's almost like you wonder if the movie can work without that animation, and I would say that it probably could work without those animated scenes, but I think that those animated scenes give us more reference into kind of like the fantastic elements. So, at the final scene of the movie where he's basically driving out of the woods and we pan up and we see several planets and like rock structures that don't exist in the world.
Yeah.
That wouldn't work, I don't think, without kind of like setting up these references with like, it's more fantastic. There's more to this area than it just being, like Portland or Pacific Northwest. It could exist in several different kind of like timelines or spaces that are more fantastic, which I think gives the movie license for acid that turns bikers into, rape-hungry demons.
Right.
And all these kind of other things that you need a little bit of buy-in if you're trying to watch it logically. But I think that the whole time you're watching the movie's telling you, like, you don't have to take this logically, like, feel the movie more than think about me.
I think it sets Mandy up as an artist too, which kind of like makes sense that Red is seeing her as her art kind of in that moment.
That's a great point, Robin. Well, and if art's like kind of one of her defining character traits or defining traits to him, like memorializing her in his brain as art is a pretty powerful statement in and of itself. I love that, Robin. I didn't even make that connection or think about that.
I didn't really until just now
happy.
either.
Yeah, that's great.
But like, how heartbreaking is it then when he's driving away at the end and just having these memories of like seeing her in a bar, I guess.
I think that was supposed to be like the first time that he saw her.
The first time that they met,
a reference to when he's talking about how that's his favorite shirt, which also was very funny when when he's like
you ripped my shirt.
Yeah.
But I was also like, who wears their favorite shirt when they're out on a revenge mission? Like, it's gonna get ruined. I think we would be remiss if we just didn't like go through every death that happened and talk about how wonderful it is.
That's number one. Go.
I don't remember them in order, but the one that I loved so very much was first of all, the chainsaw fight.
Yes.
With the longest chainsaw known to man that the guy pulls out.
I thought that was a great visual gag as he's pulling it out, and it gets longer and longer.
It just doesn't end.
So that is such a good gag.
And then when he fucking pulls him down onto it, and he's just lying there getting torn to bits by the chainsaw. I was just like, hell yeah.
I also like the general kind of like, there's something very, very, very classic horror movie about it, right?
Yeah.
Totally. But like dialed up several notches.
Totally.
Yeah, the chainsaw fight is amazing. I read somewhere that both the chainsaw fight and then the axe fight that he has in kind of like that same area, both of those, they only had a single night to shoot, which normally on like a big budget shoot, some kind of big action scene with lots of dangerous weapons would be like multiple nights, multiple days.
Right.
So they had to be like really precise with the, both in the way that they shot it and with like the choreography. And I'm always curious about that stuff because I didn't feel like that was rushed choreography. I felt like it was dangerous situation. It felt like people were going at each other hard. It didn't feel like they were pulling chainsaw hits, anything
Right,
like that.
right.
So just knowing that they shot that with basically, over an evening, it's like, God dang, that is even more impressive.
I think I read too that they shot the whole movie in 29 days or something in the woods of Belgium.
Yep.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
Mandy's death was pretty tough.
Oh,
Yeah.
Gut wrenching, heartbreaking.
I mean, being burned alive is probably one of the worst ways to go, right?
Yeah.
I would assume.
And obviously the parallel with the story that she had just told,
Yeah. I every time I see that scene, I think about Red's perspective of that because before that, he's knocked out. And I think it's implied that he's essentially out until Jeremiah wakes him up and Jeremiah has decided that his plan's not going to work and he needs to cleanse Mandy with fire. So from Red's perspective, dude's broke into his house. He was knocked out. He wakes up tied up with barbed wire and some guy is in his face talking about God and being the second coming of Jesus and the mistakes Jesus made. And he doesn't even have any real confirmation that it was Mandy, even though like it makes sense that that was Mandy within that bag. But the idea of just like waking up and someone having your lover and just being like, I am, Jesus' mistake was that he didn't put a sacrifice in his stead and you get stabbed. And just like the idea of like, who the fuck are you, man? Like, what are you trying to tell me, crazy man?
Any other deaths that stood out to you guys?
Fuck Pig, because I don't know how he died.
Yeah. Just
Fuck
gets
Pig was
dragged away.
Fuck Pig was was he the, oh, wait, okay, so what was the Black Skull biker that had the knife for a crotch that was watching porn and doing coke? Because I'm super unclear of how he actually dies. I feel like it has to relate to his knife crotch, but I don't know exactly what killed him other than like Nic Cage, or he falls on Red. We see the knife plunge into something that looks either like the floor or flesh, and then he vomits blood all over Red. So I'm assuming that he like tucked it up and stabbed
I thought
him.
that it was a throat situation because there was so much blood. Like maybe it slit his throat and he lifted him up and.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, because Red was carrying a box cutter. Bringing a box cutter to a machine gun fight with these bikers.
One of the other deaths that I loved was the bald guy who just gets the stake through the mouth.
Oh, yeah. That was like, and because like he's like shit talking right up to that, and then like right in the mouth, and that's so uncomfortable to watch.
So uncomfortable.
It's so uncomfortable to watch. And then like, but he's still like alive when it's in his mouth, and then just like the way that Red pauses for a second, and then like fucking like right into his brain. Oh, so good. So good.
The scene earlier of him just putting the window down and up and down and up and down, and just like annoying the shit out of the other cold guy. It's hilarious. And also justified his death because that was annoying.
That's all you need, because he really doesn't get his hands too dirty in the stuff that we see, but we do know that he's still a
And too, when he's cleaning that car and he's like doing the most to make sure it's pristine, that is the moment that he is going to die and that there's going to be a lot of blood.
I don't think you can clean anything in a horror movie and expect it to stay clean by the end of the game. Into the movie.
That's another good trope. Don't clean anything in a horror movie.
Yeah.
I think that's what they're doing in Scream 5. It's going to be like set in a hoarder house.
Should we award Mandy some badges?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Absolutely.
I'm ready.
Tuyet, what do you got?
My first badge is the despite all his rage, he is still just Nicolas Cage. Badge to Nicolas Cage for continuing to be the most Nicolas Cage in every movie. And even though he embodies his character so well, he's still like Nicolas Cage, and I love him for that. Well, this is just maybe my favorite prop was the axe that he forged.
Oh man,
yes,
that fucking
which
crazy
in and of
battle
itself,
axe.
in and of itself, a metal reference because it's the T from the Celtic Frost logo.
Yes.
That as a metalhead was just like so sick.
Oh, I guess Red's also a fucking metal worker.
Yeah, just like a badass.
He's a real Renaissance man. Just fucking very handy. Very, very handy.
Also a
Certain set of
blacksmith.
skills. He's really got the medieval jobs covered. He can do logging. He can blacksmith. I think all it's missing is we need to see him like work on a car or something, and then we could be like, "Yep, he's got the full
That's a
gamut of
man.
like 80s man stuff."
I don't know why there aren't more chainsaw duels. Why not?
So good.
If you can have one chainsaw in a movie, why not have two? This is a badge I've given out before, but I feel like I have to keep giving it out because it just keeps happening. But it's the housekeeping badge for just like fucking so much blood in that biker house. Someone's got to take care of that, man.
Not to mention like all the fucking Chinese food containers. That place was a mess.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Drop the gray goo for 5 seconds. Just clean the fuck up.
Come on, guys. You
I
guys
mean, they're
are
leaving dead bodies,
Seriously. you're gonna
human
get
sex
rats.
dolls.
Justin, what do you got for badges?
The first badge I have is the double vision badge, and that is awarded to the LSD trip scenes for most realistic trailers I think I've seen on film. Oftentimes it's a cheesy effect, but a lot of love went into making those, and someone very familiar with the substance helped out with that. The second is a epitaph merit badge, and I believe that a perfect thing to put on a tombstone would be, "What are you hunting? Jesus freaks."
I also like the line after that when he goes, I don't think they're in season, man.
My third merit badge that I just thought up is the must make a prequel merit badge, and I want to know the story behind Carruthers, and I want to
That
know
would be an excellent prequel.
what's going
Good
on.
character. I have 3 badges to award. The first is the Princess Bride badge. Hear me out. Because I'm awarding this badge because Mandy, like the Princess Bride, is simultaneously a fantastic homage to several genres while also being a successful entrant into those genres and that genre.
I buy it. I buy
Pretty
it.
good.
Hook, line, and
Pretty
sinker.
good,
I think
yeah.
you were right.
My second badge is the Welder of the Week badge because who knew that Nic Cage could just forge a battle axe in the middle of the movie in like a really long kind of sequence? That's just him,
Big
going to
and
town.
Really perfectly polished and just like a great form.
Yeah.
Seems like it has a good weight where it needs to be.
And it did its
weighted.
job. Yeah.
Very
Yeah,
functional.
balanced.
Yes,
Very nice,
very
yeah.
functional. He could have just made like a knife, or he could have bought an axe.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Or you think like as a logger, he
That's-
would have had some lying around.
That's a scene that they cut where he's looking at like his wide selection of tree cutting
It's like
implements.
none
He's
of
like,
these will do.
No, these don't represent my rage right. I need something custom for this job.
And then my last badge is the Gritty Go Home badge because the Cheddar Goblin is the mascot of this decade. And Gritty better get the fuck out of here.
Let's make that happen. Should we start a petition?
Yes.
Absolutely. You know that the Gritty Twitter account is actually now going to yell at you for putting that out.
You
on
know
the
what? I
video.
hope so. Bring it on, Gritty. I'm a Cheddar
Then
Goblin
maybe we get
girl.
the Cheddar Goblin account. Yeah, that's right.
I need a shirt. We need to make shirts with the
Or
cheddar
Cheddar
Goblin on it.
Girl.
And it's just vomiting mac and cheese.
Just vomiting mac and
children.
cheese, which, like, honestly did not look all that unpleasant. I was like, yeah, I would get vomited on by mac and cheese.
Yeah, I will gladly collaborate with Monk 237 to make Cheddar Goblin Girls
I would wear it
t-shirts.
every day of my life. Before we go, Justin, do you have anything to plug?
Thank you for the opportunity. So, as the world's foremost researcher of the paranormal entity known as Axe Slasher, we have new findings that will be released to the world on October 31st. As you may know, we spend a lot of time with EVP boxes and parabolic microphones up on Mount Bailey, and over time we've discovered these separate signals that we capture when overlaid together make a heavy metal sound. There's a new album coming out October 31st by Axe Slasher named Dead Alive, which is a live album recorded December 7th, 2019 at the Bluebird Theater, opening for Violence and Havoc. You can score a copy of the album itself. You can get a version that has a poster screen printed from the night that the show went on, or the newest version that is exclusively being announced here. If you go to sauceleopard.com, you can get a version of the album that comes with a bottle of Ask Gasher hot sauce, which is the Axe Slasher official hot sauce.
That's incredible.
axslasher.bandcamp.com, axslasher.com, sauceleopard.com. Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a fun time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bunk 237, a horror movie podcast, stars Tuyet and Robin Zlotnick as the final girls of Bunk 237, and Chris Charpentier as camp director Chris. The show is produced by me, Shane Segretti. Our theme song is written and performed by Dan Zlotnick, and our outro music is written and performed by Talene Kali. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and it may be featured on an upcoming episode. Have a suggestion for a movie? Then follow us on Instagram at Bunk237pod and Twitter at Bunk237. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded.